Thank you for attending. Do what you can.
Wait. I just wanted to mention that if you're interested in helping, especially in the UK here, there's a fantastic Zeitgeist movement group here, Andrew and Heather and Tom and others. So you can check out the ukproject.com. Did I get that right?
We've still got 25 minutes. Who wants to ask this guy up here? Yeah.
Oh, no, it's a Zeitgeist movement, ukproject.com, yeah.
Yes, sorry, back to my question is how would you change designers' education to drive them in the direction of the Venus Project?
How would you change education to drive it in the direction of the Venus Project?
You never give kids grades. If you do that, you say, I got an A, I got a failure, you build jealousy and envy. So our schools do not use words that they've learned thousands of years ago, like that's wrong. That's wrong doesn't tell anybody anything. But if you say, if a kid spells cat with a K, if you say very close, it's just one letter we change. Don't say that's wrong.
No, but I mean specifically in designing.
I didn't get that.
In designing?
In designing, yes. How should designers be educated? Not general education.
I think he's in design. How would designers be educated?
Depends if the design, are you an industrial designer or fabric designer?
Industrial.
Industrial. Industrial design would be based, the teaching of industrial design, on minimum waste of resources. Never design products to wear out and break down. Do the best you can. An old Volkswagen, if you drive an old Volkswagen and I drive a Mercedes, if your brakes fail, I die. So there are no old cars on the road. They weigh as much as a new car. So everybody, you don't own anything in the future. The cars are lined up for your use. You have access to cars, sailboats, but you don't own anything. You live in a house as long as you like to. You can make a painting, but you can't sell it. You can give it to people. So when you do away with ownership and people have access to the necessities of life without servitude, then you have the beginning of the civilized world. You don't have that yet.
Hello. Oh. Hello. I always find myself reading articles about scientists finding genes that may affect our personality. Is this bullshit, or do our genes get affected by our environment? What's your opinion on that?
About genes. You know, they're trying to hang everything on genes today. In the United States, they're looking for the Democratic gene, the gay gene, the Republican gene. And it's really the environment that shapes behavior. You're not born with bigotry and prejudice and hatred and a propensity to any type of value system. You pick that up in the environment. So if you have the ability to run faster or better, that doesn't give you the ability to extract significance in a culture. It doesn't give you that much advantage. So they're hanging, that's right, they're hanging everything on the gene today, and it really negates trying to design a society to improve everyone, to give everybody the ability to be creative. You know, it diverts where the problem really is.
The geneticists, by the way, are sincere people, but they think it's all in the genes. Actually, all you inherit in parents may be the color of the eye, the shape of the nose, the color of the skin, but you don't inherit values. You don't inherit bigotry and prejudice, as Roxanne pointed out. That's learned. But we know of no human being that inherited. They used to think that a Chinese baby can learn Chinese faster than an English baby because of generations of speaking Chinese. So they took an English baby and a Chinese baby, they both learn at the same rate. So you can't pass on learned ability to your kid, but you can pass on a propensity toward liver disease or heart disease. That can be passed on through the genes. But you can't pass on knowledge, values, or concepts of social arrangements. That you have to learn. That's why I say I make more mistakes than anybody I know. I also say I've never made a mistake in my life. Now here's what that means. That means the first guy that fooled with nitric acid and glycerin disappeared and the building. And his brother-in-law wrote, never fool with that stuff. What do you think? Where do you think people get ideas from? There are no answers. If a man makes wings till they're too small and jumps off a hill, he may die. That's the way the other guy learns to make the wings larger. You only learn through pain. Dr. Ehrlich did 606 experiments before he can control syphilis. Edison, 7,000 different elements before he found one that didn't burn out. But if you show kids movies of guys like Leonardo da Vinci, and they say he was so far ahead of his time, they never show you who he associated with. The friends of Leonardo da Vinci talked of gears and levers. You never heard of that. No one can jump way ahead of his society. Then there's Nostradamus. Now, Nostradamus was always wanted by the French police for fraud. Did you know that? And the people that translated Nostradamus left that out. It wouldn't sell. Then a guy named Frank Scully wrote a book called Behind the Flying Saucers. And they hired me to look at the evidence. So this guy said he was picked up by a flying saucer, taken around the universe, and brought back. So I said, what was the inside of the flying saucer like? It was a big leather belt that held them in place. Anybody that can fly 100 million light years through space doesn't need a leather belt. Then he said there was a lot of blinking lights. Let's see if I can point this out. In an airplane, they have an instrument that moves and says your fuel mixture is too rich. So the pilot adjusts the fuel mixture. In the future, when the needle touches that, it will change the fuel mixture. You don't need blinking lights. You know, an advanced civilization doesn't have somebody talking on the radio like that. It doesn't have anything like that. And the flying saucer, the big one that most of you have seen, has 3 spheres underneath it and portholes. And that was a 1927 chicken brooder, Sears and Roebuck. So all of the flying saucers that I have seen, that people photographed, were out of scale with the trees in the background. They're only this size. They said they were 500 feet in diameter, you know. So I have a way of checking those things. So I told Frank Scully, so far, I haven't met anybody. So he said, have you ever met Dr. G? I said, I never heard of him. He said he was at Wright Field and he took the flying saucers apart. Now, I was at Wright Field during the war making safety devices only. So I met Dr. G, and I said, Dr. G, is it true that you couldn't drill through it and machine cut it with anything? He said, yes. He says, I've taken a lot of them apart. And how did you do that if you couldn't drill them, saw them, cut them? He said, well, I use a new method. They went together like a jigsaw. So I said, do you happen to have a piece of flying saucer? He said, yes, in my car. I said, wonderful, bring it in. I'm not closed on that. So I brought in a piece of material that he said we couldn't drill through. It was transparent. It looked like lucite or plexiglass to me. And that doesn't mean I'm right. So I asked Mrs. Scully, can I use your oven? And I tied it in a knot and gave it back to the guy. And he says, I must have brought the wrong material. Maybe he did. So I said, can you bring the right material next week? And there was a whole gathering at Scully's home. And he brought me a metal part, and it still had the Army serial number on it. It was the center of a Hamilton Standard propeller. So I said, I brought my catalog and showed it to Scully. He said, Jack, if I put your stuff in the book, it won't sell. The same with Nostradamus. Get the French book called Nostradamus. You'll see what the real guy was like. The translation was not like that. Don't take my word for anything. I'll tell you where to get the information. Yes?
Yeah,
Do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question about scarcity, and not with regards to production, but more about in nature. Like, for example, if you know the apartment buildings you showed like in your video.
Can you hold the mic closer to your mouth?
Yeah, sorry. If you know the apartment buildings you showed at the start in your video, well, if a lot of people, if the most desirable one is the penthouse apartment, you know, that's essentially that's scarcity right there. And if the apartment's built in like the most desirable part of the country, let's say, you know, who decides who gets it? There's scarcity right there. So you can have abundance in terms of food and production, all these things, but there's still scarcity that exists in nature because, you know,
There's still scarcity
we've got limited
more
space.
desirable places to live or penthouses.
You talk about the present-day system. You see, have you seen
Talking
our...
about your houses, the uppermost apartment would be the penthouse and more desirable place to live.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
So instead of making fair, square buildings, if you do that, most people want the corner apartment where the view is better. So we make our buildings round so the view is pleasant for everybody, and some of the buildings turn.